All right. Welcome, wonderful listeners, to the Shadow and Starlight Podcast, where two friends dive deep into fantasy and romantasy books. We get into the stories, characters, world building, lore, and more. And most importantly, we will have a damn good time while we do it.
So buckle your seatbelts for this wild roller coaster out of emotions, magical worlds, and laughs. I'm Kinsey.
I'm Kana.
And today we are covering chapters 1 through 9 of Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Woo!
First and foremost, please listen carefully to our content warning. These are adult books we're covering, and neither of us have a filter, so this podcast is rated R and for those 18 plus. Especially this book, it's even more dirty than When the Moon Matched. Regarding spoilers, if you have not finished the entire Quicksilver book, please come back after you do so. While we are discussing the first 9 chapters, we will be doing so with the perspective of what happens in the entire book. This way we can really dive deeper into the theories and really appreciate the foreshadowing and the writing of Miss Callie Hart. She's amazing. So going forward, all episodes on our show will contain spoilers for the whole series in question.
Next, if you like what you hear today and want more, please come back next Thursday, and next Thursday, and next Thursday, next Thursday, and every Thursday after that for a new episode. As with every podcast, we would love to hear your feedback to better ourselves and expand our book-loving community. Please feel free to give us reviews, reach out to us on social media, and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and watch us on YouTube at Shadow and Starlight Pod.
Yes, a couple exciting announcements today. So we actually got in touch with Sarah A. Parker's team, and we are going to be doing an interview with her in March. So this will be, I think, after she finishes writing the Ballad of Falling Dragons. So maybe she'll give us a cool little hint or excerpt or something. So it's really exciting. She seems so cool. I'm actually going to try and go to her book signing in a couple days. She's coming to Georgia, which is amazing. And I'm really excited.
So excited.
So be on the lookout. We are going to be doing an interview probably sometime around March. It'll come out. So just keep an eye out for that as we prepare for book 2 for our next season. And then a reminder that the Quicksilver audiobook is going to be coming out the 29th of October. And another exciting announcement, our website is currently in development and I'm really excited about it. We're going to try and make it seem like you're coming into like a fantasy world or a fantasy book when you go to our website. So be on the lookout for that as well. Hopefully we can have it ready for you guys soon.
Yes, super excited for all those things. Also, yes. I would like to point out a really cool accolade that we just reached not too long ago. We had Sarah A. Parker comment on 2 of our posts on Instagram, which is super exciting. We were like, ah!
I'm still not over it.
No. We're like so fangirling real hard right now.
Yes, we're also going to try and get an interview with Miss Callie, so fingers crossed on that one. I'd love to talk to her about her book.
Yes, especially I would love to just sit down and talk to her for hours about Fisher. Like, we don't even have to talk about the book. I just want to know how you created this character.
If we interview her, Kenzie's gonna be like, so let's talk about Fisher.
Let's talk about Fisher,
and then let's circle back to Fisher.
To kick off this episode, Kana's going to lead us through our Shadow and Starlight synopsis, aka her unhinged summary detailing the events of these chapters.
Yes. This story starts out in Zilverin, the Silver City, and while the name might sound glorious, I would not want to live here. It's always hot. There's like 0 shade. They give you a tiny bit of water each day, filtered by a grate that catches the solids. And the city guardians operate on unchecked violence, and anyone without privilege is basically left to die. So it doesn't sound like a very nice place to live. Pretty quickly after meeting our girl Saeris Fane, we learn that she might seem like the next downtrodden scammer trying to survive, but she's also resourceful, badass, sassy, and has quite the reputation at her local tavern. She will do anything to keep her brother Hayden alive, having the audacity to steal a gold gauntlet from a very rude guard and then scale a wall like a spider monkey to get away. Father figure Elroy refuses to melt down the gauntlet in his glass workshop, warning her that this might be the dumbest and riskiest thing she's ever done, and personally, I support it. High risk, high reward. Saeris refuses to lose her prize, determined to escape this hellhole of thirst and death. While the two argue, we learn that Saeris has a way with metals that she keeps very secret. And when she sets off to find her troublemaker brother, she finds him busted and broke outside aforementioned tavern. Knowing just who is responsible for her brother's condition, she heads inside to find Carrie and Swift, aka the best side character ever written. For real. Prepare for a dissertation by me, each episode on why I love him. Giving Hayden the gauntlet to babysit, she faces off with her former lover. The two banter over a drink until Carrion reveals he heard about her escapade with the gauntlet and wants her to get it out of the third ward before they all pay for her crime with their blood. Having had enough of this particular brand of humor, she exits to find Hayden and the Gauntlet of Doom missing. Frantically searching for Hayden, she is pursued by guardians until she finds him cornered by an entire unit. Determined to save him, she confesses to her crime and lets her rage become a song in her blood. Drawing her blade, she holds her own against the highly skilled fighters, killing a couple before eventually being taken by the guards. Then she finally gets to knock something off her childhood bucket list before she dies, visiting the palace. Not so fun considering she's in a cell this time. Feigning bravery, she is taken before the undying Queen Madra in a rather interesting chamber with a rather interesting sword poking out of a rather interesting platform. Madra is interested in learning how Saeris learned to fight so well, correctly assuming that the rebels taught her how to fight. While Saeris denies this, Madra asks if the Fae taught her. Interesting. And in this world, we learn that the Fae are rumored to be cannibals, warmongers, and beastly creatures without a moral compass that Madra supposedly cast out. Heron is ordered to deal with Saeris and then wipe out the entire 100,000 people of the Third Ward. The cruelty of this order shocking to both us and Saeris. She's reeling and she's then skewered by Heron despite her pleas. Just when he's about to end it, his dagger freezes and liquefies in his hands. The streams of liquid come alive, crawling up his leg. Determined to add one more murder to her list of crimes, she gets up and approaches the sword on the platform while Heron begs her not to touch it. She draws it, wounding Heron before noticing the pool of live silver beneath her feet, awakened by her actions. The Angel of Death arrives within the silver to claim Saeris himself. Oh, wait. It's Fisher. Even on her deathbed, Saeris remarks on how smoking hot he is before Death himself carries her into the pool of Quicksilver. Saeris wakes up to a few surprises. 1, she's in an entirely different realm. 2, Everline, this girl who's taking care of her, is a Fae. Ooh, scary. And 3, she can not only have a hot bath, but also unlimited cups of filtered water. The two debrief recent events, and Saeris learns she is in Evelia. Enter Renfis, aka Kana's second love of the book. He has come for Fisher's chain that he gave her. Shocking revelation, one after the other, Saeris learns that she is trapped due to her important powers that she doesn't really know too much about, and Lane's father is King Belican of the Evelian Fae. Saeris enjoys the palace porn in the Phaeacians as Everlane takes her to meet the king in Evelia's Grand Hall, which is decorated with a colossal dragon skull. Yay, dragons. As imposing as King Douchebag is, Saeris continues to be iconic, refusing to bow and interrupting him not once, but twice. The king charges her with the responsibility to waken the Quicksilver and reopen pathways between worlds. No big deal. It's not like they've been waiting 1,000 years for this to happen. Whenever Lion tries to rush her out, King Dickface orders the dog brought in. Death, the living curse, the bane of Gilthry, the Black Knight, aka Kingfisher, is restrained before the king in a half-rabid state. He's smoking hot, he's got that dog in him, and he's also a scourge that stalks your children's nightmares and is responsible for the torching of an entire city, according to Belican Buttface. Sensing the deadly direction of the riot, Everlane, or should I say Cleverlane, begs the Oracle to feign a vision to prevent his execution. At the end of the scene, Fisher is sentenced to aid the war effort against Stannisroth while teaching Saeris all he knows about the Quicksilver. How convenient for us as smut readers that the two are forced to work together. The crew visits the library in the next chapter, and Fisher is a tad mean, but in a hot way. Saeris gets a crash course on alchemy, Evelian history, and the politics of the court. Fisher provides Saeris with a dose of hope about Hayden, saying he has likely been conscripted to defend Zilverin from the Fae now that the portals may be opening again. Saeris observes the drama of this inner circle, and Fisher asks her if she knows her way around the forge, and boy oh boy does she. Saeris is a mess of anxiety, and Fisher is a savage. He flips off the gods on the way to the forge, and then coins our favorite new nickname, O'Shaleth. Fuck. This is going to happen every time I have to say this. As he tells her that she is not safe in the Fae realm, honestly. A millennia ago, she probably would have been dinner. Instead of comforting her new friend Lane from Fisher's particular brand of honesty, she decides to pick his brain in the forge since he's really the only forthcoming person. The first taste of banter between these two is delicious, and I can already feel the sexual tension brimming. After Fisher declares his magic is a sacred gift to be used discerningly for righteous purposes, the two spend hours breaking their back to clean up the forge, and Saeris questions him. Said Shadow Daddy then uses his quote-unquote sacred gift to be used for righteous purposes to magically restore the forge, and she's pissed. Rightfully so.
Yes.
And that's where the stretch of chapters ends.
Yay!
Yay!
I'm just so excited to talk about Fisher.
Oh, God. Oh, you got a problem, girl.
I don't know.
I'm excited to hear you fawn over him like I was drooling over Khan.
Oh my gosh, I'm so ready. Now that we are finished with the summary, time to head into our chapter chat section where we will discuss all notable things in this stretch of chapters, including theories, foreshadowing, and more.
Yes, before we get into that, I just want to say thank you, Miss Callie, for the pronunciation guide. It's very helpful.
Yes.
We're actually just reviewing it before we're filming this episode, and probably won't be the last time we'll review it. But it's very helpful for podcasting purposes.
So our first bit of foreshadowing that we're going to talk about is Saeris's magic. Ooh. I think it was chapter 2 when she gets back to the ward. She takes the gauntlet back to Elroy and his forge. Yeah. He says, quote, "What if they track you down and realize what you can do? The way you can affect metal," end quote. So, by this quote, we know that Saeris can manipulate metal. We also know this is in obscurity, judging from Elroy's tone. Magic or magical beings aren't really common amongst the regular Zilverin people, and this dialogue from Elroy is just a tiny, teeny glimpse into the magic to come, because we learn in this stretch of chapters that Saeris is an alchemist. Yep, that's right. Our girl can liquefy a dagger in seconds, and even summon an ancient sword and awaken a Quicksilver pool that slept for over 1,000 years. From these chapters, we learn that Saeris has also been drawn to the metal and metalwork her entire life. Quote, "I combed through the library's information not on glass working as he thought I should have, but metalwork, daydreaming of what it would have been like to have access to so much metal," end quote. Almost like her being an alchemist naturally inclines her to these talents.
Yeah, I did think that was interesting that despite she's always trying to hide her magic and not acknowledge it, she just can't help herself.
Yeah.
She gotta know what's the deal. All right, next we're going to talk about the foreshadowing to Carrion's big secret. And so Callie, the way she describes him, she gives us a little snippet that kind of hints towards his Fae lineage that we find out about later. Quote, "Sparkling blue eyes danced with amusement as Carrion met my gaze. His hair was copper and gold and burnished umber, as if each strand were a fine thread of the metals that were so precious to Queen Madra. He was always the tallest person in the room by at least a foot, broad across the shoulders, and held himself with a confidence that made all the girls in Zilverin swoon." Now, from first glance, you would think that Callie is just introducing a new character and describing his appearance like he's hot, which he is. I've seen the fan art. But she's really hinting towards his Fae-like creatures here. It's definitely foreshadowing. And she's seeing if we can put the pieces together this early on. And this is definitely a detail I overlooked at the beginning. She describes how big he is, how much taller he is than the average human. And when she introduced our Fae friends that we meet later, they're described very much the same way. And then also in this section, we get some key foreshadowing about Carrion's past family and his life as a Fae. So in chapter 8, we learn that there's a rumor that the Dianthus heir is in Zilverin somewhere. And later in the book, Carrion will confirm that he used to be Carrion Dianthus, firstborn son to Rurik and Amelia Dianthus. At first glance, he might seem like any other comedic relief side character, but he is connected to our story in a major and unexpected way, because Bellican Buttface, as I was talking about earlier, was the one that killed the Dianthus line. And so Carrion's the only one left. So we might just think he's her ex-lover, but I'm sure he's going to be like crucial in what happens in book 2.
Yeah. I thought this was very smart on Callie's part, because I feel like My first read, of course, him introducing her, I was skeptical, like why he was being so introduced in like great detail, and I was like, "Ooh, I hope this is not her love interest." And then, because of the way like he was acting when he was first introduced, of course, I learned to love him later on in the book. But when he popped back up later, I was like, "Why is he here? What is he doing here?"
I know. I was like, this is so crazy. And then when you learn his family lineage, you're like, okay, this makes sense to the story now.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just like totally random at first. We're like, Carrions in the
it is
Fae
very
world
random.
now?
Yeah,
What? I'm
yeah.
not mad. I'm not mad. I'm definitely not mad.
I'm not
But
mad either.
actually, I love it.
Yep.
Hmm.
So the next bit of foreshadowing we're going to touch is about the twins, and we'll start with this quote: "The twins beat down on top of my head. Their punishing heat making my mind swim." End quote. So this is just a little introduction into the mythological system here. We know that the Zilverins and the Evelians worship many different gods, and in this particular scene, I assumed that the twins were just the sun and the moon. I just tried to put the pieces together here because we didn't really get any explanation for the twins. She just described them as being like bright and really hot. So I was just like, oh, the sun. But it's a bit more complex than that. So in chapter 7, we learn from Everlane that, quote, Balmithin, twin sisters, goddesses of the sky, legend says that they once were one god, but a mighty storm came and Balmithin refused to take shelter as it raged across the land. The powerful spirit within the storm was furious that she didn't cower before him, and so he lashed her with forks of lightning again and again. The lightning struck Balmithin, but she didn't die. Instead, she cracked and split in two, becoming Bal and Mithin. Bal is the goddess of the sun. Mithin is the goddess of the moon, who presides over all the night. Bal, Mithin, or Belia and Min, which is what the Zilverins called them. But in Evelia, they refer to them as Bal and Mithin. But I still have to say, we get a little bit of foreshadowing from the twins in this chapters that introduce them and go a little bit more in depth about them, and we do actually get to interact with the twins later on in the book, which we will cover in due time. So stay tuned for
Yes.
that.
I think it's interesting. This is an introduction to the mythology in the book, but it's also giving us like a hint of how connected the two worlds are going to be. Like, they're in two totally different realms, but they have so many more connections than we think at first.
Yeah, it's a lot of mythological connections between the realms, and we know that Madra wanted to banish all of the gods and the goddesses from Zilverin, which is why a lot of them are forgotten. They don't worship the same ones that the Evelians worship, but the twins are one of the ones that they both steal reference to, and those are one of the things they had in common once Saeris actually got into the Fae world. I think all the realms at some point worshipped all the same gods, but again, Madra and her like evil plan, she just wanted them to be forgotten, and she wanted no Fae references. She wanted to be non-existent, basically. Like, she didn't want people to know who she was or where
Yeah.
she came from, basically. So
Well, fail.
big fail.
Big fail. Well, not really big fail, but you still failed.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the family tree, because we also do get some foreshadowing as to the fact that Fisher and Everlane are siblings in the stretch of chapters. I don't know why, but I believe Callie made this obvious on purpose, or maybe not. Who knows? But I do think it was very obvious that she was hinting towards something here. I think it's because we know less about Fisher and his past than Callie reveals in chapter 8, when Saeris has the belief that her family may still be alive in Silverin. She asks Everlane, "Do you have a brother?" Wouldn't you want to know for certain if he was dead or alive? Her asking this is some subtle but cool foreshadowing. Lane was apart and wondering about Fisher for over a century, so this is really hitting home, these questions, and Saris doesn't even know that when she's asking. And Everlane, of course, frantically looks towards Fisher, answers yes, and of course this raises alarm flags. And without a doubt, later in the chapter, Everlane proves all of our suspicions correct, confirming that her and Fisher are siblings, but we don't exactly know the dynamics of their sibling bond or if they're half or full siblings yet. But then we learn Fisher's mom was forced to move to the Winter Palace and marry King Buttface, and she then bared him a child who he hoped would be a male heir, but to his dismay, it was Clever Lane. And there we have it. Half siblings, but siblings nonetheless. And yeah, I would
Yes.
say on my first read, I did start to guess that they were siblings pretty quickly.
Yeah. On my first read, I was annoyed that, so like at the beginning of this chapter, that weird interaction between Everlane and Saeris happened where she's like looking towards Fisher and yeah, like I have a sibling. I'm like, I made a note saying, oh, like they're siblings, they're related somehow. And then at the end of the chapter, she just reveals it. I'm like, bruh, like where's the suspicion here? But I get now after reading the whole book, I understand why she revealed it so early on because it was so much more that needed to be revealed.
Yeah.
But at first I was like, damn, why she didn't wait longer to reveal that? Like keep the suspicion going.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to talk about the Quicksilver. And I would briefly like to touch on the scene between Saeris and Heron. So it does foreshadow towards a couple different things. First, it foreshadows the power of the Quicksilver, and then it also foreshadows the existence of other realms. So in chapter 5, Madra sentences Saeris to a long, painful death, and Heron is to execute this death. And as he is slicing her up, filleting her up, Saeris liquefies his dagger and it runs up his arms and legs. And Heron, key point right here, so keep it in mind. Heron was already wearing a glove. So after already having a glove, he still freaks out when the metal starts to touch his skin. Quote, Terra claimed the captain. He cast about, wild-eyed, breathing heavily as the thin streams of metallic liquid that had once been his weapon rolled toward him, pulling and diverging as if it were seeking him, as if it were alive, end quote. I overlooked not only that he had already had a glove on his hand, but the reason behind his reaction. So at first I just thought that he didn't want the liquefied metal to touch him, probably because it was hot. I don't know. I feel like metal has to be hot for it to melt. So I just thought like that was his reaction. I don't know. But that would still raise questions about why he was already wearing a glove while he was wielding his own weapons. Interesting. So his weapon indeed had Quicksilver in them, which warranted his reaction. Quote, he slapped his pants leg, brushing frantically with a sweeping motion, though very careful not to touch the molten silver at the same time, end quote. So it is evident that Heron is aware of the Quicksilver and understands its effect without a relic, which is proved true in chapter 9. They do explain that Heron did have Quicksilver in his weapon. And I think that Heron is an example of the long-lasting effects of it, because when he reappears towards the end of the book, he is described as, quote, his eyes were orbs of scuffed metal, pure Quicksilver, end quote. And, quote, his lips were thin and peeling, his skin wrinkled and translucent, end quote. So again,
God. Poor Heron.
I feel like on my first read, I feel like I overlooked a lot on my first read, but I did overlook these tiny details that she was kind of throwing in there. I feel like the scene was just so action-packed that I didn't really stop to realize or question, like, oh, why is he wearing a glove when he's wielding his own weapons?
Yeah.
And why is he reacting like this to the metal? And I think that she was very smart about how she introduced the Quicksilver, because, again, like, you would just assume that he just doesn't want the metal on him, but it's for deeper reasons. And she does explain way later at the end of the book, when he reappears, the effects that this Quicksilver can have on people. So...
Yeah, he's not going to win any beauty pageants.
Oh, no, he's not. Unfortunately. Sorry.
Sorry, buddy.
Sorry.
That's what you get for being a piece of shit.
Yeah. That's what you get for, like, slicing up Saeris, because why would you do that?
No. Bro, she's just trying to survive.
Literally. Next, we're going to talk about Kingfisher's condition. In the scene where Saeris has to go in front of King Buttface for her trial.
We're just going to call him that from now on.
I think so. I love it.
Pelican Buttface.
Yes.
You suck.
Fisher reappears in the scene, and he's described as rabbit. Quote, amongst them, fashioned like a rabbit animal, they dragged the male up the walkway toward the dais. End quote. Again, he's described as rabbit and animal-like, and we know this is because he used the Quicksilver pool without his relic and then spent 10 extra days without it. And you may ask, well, if he no longer is in the Quicksilver pool, how is he still being affected? Well, maybe this quote will help you out. Quote, I'd never seen that shade of green before, a jade so bright and vibrant that it didn't look real. I noticed the filaments of silver threaded through his right iris back in Madra's Hall of Mirrors, but I'd imagine them being so close to death and all. The silver shone there, though definitely real, forming a reflective metallic corona around the back well of his pupil. End quote. So first I'd like to say, poor Kingfisher. My man, I'm so sorry. Because this is only the beginning of his pain and suffering. We just had no clue how much this man has been through before and after this. So this scene helps explain his rabid behavior because Kingfisher does have Quicksilver stuck in his eye, which is why he needs his relic in order to keep it at bay. And without his relic, the Quicksilver puts him through agonizing internal pain as it can speak to people's conscience and basically put them on the brink of insanity. People are often known to go mad when affected by this powerful metal, and when Saeris was trying to heal while wearing this relic, Fisher was fighting to keep his sanity those 10 days without his relic. And we do learn in this other chapters how the Quicksilver got stuck in his eye. And I screenshot this because I didn't put this in the outline, but like I figured this out right before we started filming. Okay, so basically, Fisher was forced to travel through a pathway without his relic once. And once he came out of the Quicksilver pool, it was still some stuck in his eye. He had a healer that tried to drain it out of him, but they could only get so much out. So basically, he's just stuck with the Quicksilver in his right eye.
Yeah. Our poor dude.
I know.
I will say him being slightly mentally insane is like really hot.
It is. It's one of the reasons why
I feel so bad
we
for
love
him, but I'm like, ew, yeah.
Anyways,
all right, we're gonna get into some theories. I wanted to talk about Saeris maybe having Fae lineage and how this maybe connects to Hayden or maybe doesn't. So in the early chapters, Saeris and Hayden are described in depth. Quote, "We were both tall, lanky creatures, but apart from our shared personality quirks and the fact that the two of us loomed over most people in a crowded room, there wasn't much about us that was alike." And that description is interesting to me, especially since we've been talking about how she describes people with Fae lineage or connections to the Fae world as like a lot taller than anyone else has described. So I'm curious, like, do they have a different parent? Why do they look so different and why are they both so tall? If they were of the same exact lineage, wouldn't Hayden have powers too? Or maybe it just skipped him? I don't know. Also, when Everlane learns Saeris' name, she remarks, Saeris, a pretty name, a Fae name. So we know that Saeris is a Fae name, and compared to her name, I feel like Hayden's is pretty plain. Like almost a normal name from our reality.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just find that weird that like they're described as so different, their names are so different, and she has powers, he doesn't. And then dark hair is also, I think Everlane tells her it's a royal trait amongst the Yvellian Fae. She does have dark hair. So I'm like, okay, does she have a drop of royal Fae lineage somewhere in there? And even Fisher points this out too. Like, she must have a drop of Fae blood enough to stop Solus from burning off her hands. So that was when she wielded the god sword. So is this from Fae blood or is it because she's an alchemist? I don't know. I have a lot of questions. I really just felt like the mentions of her possibly having, I think like 3 or 4 things I just talked about, mentions of her possibly having Fae lineage. I just feel like that's really pointed in the first 9 chapters to be talking about that so much.
Yeah. I feel like her ancestry and just her past in general is like very vague. This book, like we did learn a little bit about her mother, but not much. She was vaguely like introduced, and like when she was introduced, we learned about how she died, but we don't really learn much about their childhood or basically where they came from. So it does raise a lot of flags.
Yeah, there's a lot of mystery there for sure.
Yeah.
And then while I'm like talking about people I think could be Fae, let's talk about Elroy and my crack theory that he's Finran, which is Fisher's father. In chapter 2, Elroy is described as being taller the most. Again, like I just said, that's how she describes a lot of Fae people. And she describes him as being a force of nature. Like, she has no idea how he survives the heat. She's passing out all the time when they're working in the workshop, but he's just chilling. And also find it like it's interesting that maybe he is Fae. Maybe he knows who Saeris is. Maybe he's Fisher's father. Was he possibly training Saeris to be an alchemist? He doesn't necessarily encourage her to use her powers, but like he was training her and working in a forge and stuff. So that's another element of it. But I'm just like, what are the freaking chances? She has a power relating to metals and she works under Elroy in a workshop that has metals in it. So either maybe he saw her out or she was just drawn to this line of work. That's how it happened. But I really like this theory that like Elroy might be Finran, which is Fisher's father that brought Carrion over to Silverin. And Elroy's described as, quote, a legend amongst even the most dangerous criminals that ran the third. Taller than most, broad, his back muscles straining beneath his sweat-stained shirt. He'd been a force of nature, a pillar of rock hewn out of mountain. immovable, indestructible, end quote. And I feel like this description and like how important he is to her and just like how legendary he is in Zilverin, even though he's a glassmaker, is that what they're called? He seems so important, and like for us not to get him back in the story, I wonder if he's going to connect back in future books. And I feel like if he would, it might be as Finran, possibly. I don't know. I could be way off. Maybe he's just a glassmaker.
Yeah, I like this theory. Also feel like if any author, especially in the fantasy genre, if any author takes the time out to really describe and introduce a character, they have some importance to the story.
Mhm.
Like, they would never introduce a character or give them as much book time as Elroy has if he wasn't important. So I feel like he's definitely going to come back, of course, in book 2 and make another appearance. But I do find that theory very interesting. I'm excited to see what role he plays.
Even if it's not Elroy, I feel like Finran is probably still alive. Or at least I hope so. I don't know.
Well, because he was the one that took Carrion to Zilverin. Did they tell us where he went after he left him there?
Nah.
So yeah. It could be possible. He's
alive or dead.
Yeah.
Who knows? Dragons!
Yes! The next theory we're going to talk about is our theory on dragons. Of course. Of course we have to touch on this topic. Of course.
Yes. Never forget.
So I found this very interesting when Everlane is telling Saeris about the different gods that they worship. Saeris notices an abnormal beast among them and asks Everlane what exactly it is. And Everlane whispers to her and tells her that it's a dragon, and it's also the last dragon. And Saeris, of course, is curious, and she's asking her how it died, what happened to it, and Everlane just promises to tell her everything about it later. This is very interesting because dragons are mentioned a lot in this book, and we know better than to overlook something so monumental this early on. It could be our obsession with dragons, who knows, but I feel like Callie Hart hinted towards dragons so many times for a reason. And I definitely believe that dragons may appear later on in the series. And Everlane's reaction to Saeris' questions about the beast just raises a lot of flags for me, almost as if she's hiding something or she knows something that she's just not telling us right now. One of the theories that I came up with in my head, I don't know if this is like far-fetched or what, but I feel like Everlane either knows whose dragon that was, or it could be hers. I feel like Everlane would be the type of character that actually has a dragon.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, so I don't know. It could be like somewhere from her lineage, or just like something that just touches close to home for her, why she's so secretive, and so like her reaction to it just put me off a little bit. Yeah. So I don't know. There is a lot of suspicion around Callie Hart and this dragon mentioning, so we'll see.
On my first read, I was like, oh my god, there's going to be dragons in this story.
Yes.
But I mean, there's really not. I feel like the reason it was mentioned is because the story of the last dragon is something that's going to connect to our plot, or just be a huge reveal in future books, or possibly that it's not actually the last dragon and we're going to see him come into the story again, which I really hope is the case, because that'd be way cooler than just learning the story about a dragon.
Right.
So we'll see. Maybe we can ask Callie in our interview that we hopefully get with her to put dragons in the next books.
After we talk about Fisher for hours, we can just be like, so dragons, question mark.
Dragons and Fisher. Yay. That's all we want to talk about. All right, we're going to move on to our favorite notable moments and quotes. My first one I want to get into is how Saeris is a badass bitch. One of my favorite moments in these chapters was super early on when she was just fucking up those guardians. Not to mention she hasn't had any water and she's been scaling walls and running around and everything. And she also just chugged a whiskey. So seeing her badassery in action despite all this was sick. Her movements were like so calculated and precise, and the rebel training certainly prepared her to take care of herself. And I just loved it. It really hooked me into the book immediately. I want to read this quote off. They stalked forward, shoulders tucked up around their ears, swords at the ready, and the fire that had been simmering away inside of me since I was a child finally boiled over. I wasn't going to be restrained. I wasn't going to be bullied or pinned down or told to be quiet by these bastards. Not anymore. End quote. And I love this. Just the revenge in this action was extra sweet, especially since we know at this point that she lives in shit condition. She's watched all her loved ones die at the hands of this unjust place. So I love it when it just hits that tipping point and she's like, fuck this, like no more. I'll let Mackenzie do most of the Fisher talk, but I do want to say I just love his dry humor. It was cracking me up. I was just dying, especially when Lane asks where Ren is, and Fisher replies he's like scrubbing his balls or something. I was like, what? I love it. Can I come? Anyways, or can I help?
Can I?
Okay, my next favorite moment. Can you guess who? It's Carrion. The most notorious gambler, cheat, and smuggler in the entire city. Uncommonly good in bed. Saeris describes him as the only man in Silverin who ever made me scream his name out of pleasure rather than frustration. Ooh, must be that Fae thing. You guys can obviously tell I love him, but at first this man, he pissed me off because of how he was like poking at Saeris in front of his dumb little jockeys. But by the end of the book, I'm obsessed. It wasn't until he was concerned about Saeris and the third ward and how dangerous it was for her to steal the gauntlet that I started to look at him differently. I was like, oh, he actually cares about what happens to other people, possibly. So I was like, okay, maybe he's not just like an asshole. But on my reread, I was eating up every word out of this man's mouth. Even though he was annoying me at first, I was like, I love it. Give me more.
Yeah.
I don't know why I love him. I don't know. This needs to be studied.
He's a pretty cool side character.
He is. I don't know. It's just so funny. I love like really sarcastic characters. And then my last favorite moment I want to talk about was Saeris' speech to Heron. It was giving me Mockingjay Katniss vibes, just a revelation, and I loved it. So I'm going to read it off. Quote, "It isn't disease that is contagious in my ward, Captain. It's dissent. Anarchy and rebellion spread like a wildfire. We've been reduced to embers, yes, but the coals that lie beneath the ash of my ward are still hot enough to burn. Do you know much about metalwork, Captain? I do. It's under the most unbearable conditions that the sharpest, most dangerous weapons are forged. And why we are dangerous, Captain. She's turned us all into weapons. That is why she won't suffer my people to live." End quote. Ooh, I got chills. Right now, and then also when I read it for the first time. At this point, I was already pretty hooked after seeing how badass Saeris was, but this quote just sold me completely. You know, I love a good romance, but I also love a good political plot, especially when it revolves around rebelling against an unjust kingdom or ruler. I just loved it. It was giving me the Mockingjay vibes where I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be like an epic rebellion book, and I'm here for it. Go, girl.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh my god. Get out of here.
So of course, all of my favorite moments revolve around none other than Death himself. So my first favorite moment was the scene where she's in the Hall of Mirrors and she's getting filleted by Heron, and Fisher enters the chat to save our girl. I don't know why, but I love that Saeris described Fisher as Death. It just shows how dark he is, and this is constantly referenced from his various dark wardrobes. My favorite wardrobe being the dark green tunic. I just know that it really, I don't know, it highlights his eyes because his eyes are described to be jaded. So I just want to see this. I gotta find some fan art of him in his green tunic. But I'm gonna say a quote here. So, quote, "My vision was going at last. Blackness crept in, rolling before my eye like a midnight fog. Only it wasn't a fog. It was something else. Death. The bastard had come to claim me in person." End quote.
I love that
Chills,
too.
chills. Oh my gosh. I only got chills really the second time I read this quote. The first time I read it, I was just trying to get through the scene, trying to figure out what was going to happen. But when I realized what she was talking about, I was like, yes.
Yeah. Yes. It's definitely cooler on a reread because it was a scene where you're like, what the fuck is happening?
Right.
On the first read, you're like, why? Why? Death? What?
What? Yeah, I think this description just foreshadows his character and his banter between him and Saeris. I just love it. And I don't know, it might just be the toxicity in me, but I just love a man who can command his woman and keep her in check. I don't know. Kingfisher just bleeds so much confidence. And granted, he already knows who Saeris is and is being stubborn and trying to deny that this is his mate. But his smart remarks and his poor attempt at ignoring her were just so good. And the banter ate it up. Loved it. Also, love his description and how the Quicksilver is described in his right iris. And to circle back around to his dark green wardrobe, I just know it compliments. I just know it compliments his eyes so beautifully. I just need to see this. Almost done. I promise. I'm almost done. Fisher is just full of so many secrets at the beginning, and I enjoyed discovering the mystery of none other than Kingfisher. And let's not forget his gosh darn it nickname for Saeris. And I was planning to ramble more about him, but I feel like I've said enough. So,
well, don't worry, we have 4 more episodes to talk about it.
I'm fangirling hard right now.
I can tell. Is this how I sounded when I was talking about Khan?
Yeah. No. I might be a little bit worse though.
I mean, you really love this man. I like it though. I love a shadow daddy, but you're obsessed. Yes. But this is why our friendship works, is because you get the shadow daddies and I get whatever my type is.
Yeah, I feel like the best friendships are when the friends have different types in men, and I feel like we definitely have different types.
One of my other book friends also loves the shadow daddies, so her and Mackenzie are working out a custody situation for Xaden and Kingfisher, and soon to be Azrael when she reads Akatar. Yeah, she's like, "You get him 1 week, I'll get this one this week."
I'm gonna put them in rotation. Yeah,
yes,
alternate weekends. You know, joint custody.
On your birthday,
the whole thing.
You get all 3 of them.
Okay.
Don't blush over there, girl.
If my father is watching this, I am so sorry.
Oh, shit.
I'm going boy crazy right now.
Thank God. My parents told me that they were like too confused about the book to keep watching. I was like, thank God. You've been so disappointed in me.
Well, my dad was like, oh, I'll figure it out. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, good luck with that. I know. I haven't talked to anyone that's not read the books and listened, so I don't know if they're like able to follow along based on the summaries, but I kind of doubt it.
I do feel like it'll be much easier if you read the book, which is why we put so many warnings in the beginning, because if you're not a part of the fantasy world and you don't understand what's going on, it's hard. Yeah, it took us a long time to get here to be able to comprehend fantasy books.
Yeah. Especially when the moon hatched. That was an advanced read. It's doable if you're not an experienced fantasy reader, but it's not easy, and you're probably not going to enjoy it.
No.
As much as you would.
It's hard. Well, like, it's not hard, but it is challenging to get through it. But when I read When the Moon Hatched and I could comprehend what was going on, I understood everything, I was like, I finally made it. I can read a fantasy book and not be like, what the heck is going on?
That was a milestone.
Milestone for sure.
Yes, seriously. All right, folks, let's close out our chapter chat and move on to our myths and magic, where we will dive into the mythology that inspired Quicksilver, as well as explaining a world building topic. And today we are going to be doing a geography and different realm breakdown of this world. If you feel like you're an expert, just skip ahead to our mini-series Mix and Match.
Yes. So we're going to touch on the mythology first, and we're going to start with Kingfisher's lovely nickname for Miss Saeris, which is, O'Shaleth. No good romantic book lacks an iconic nickname. Remember that, because we got some more good ones coming up. And Kingfisher has a pretty interesting one. In chapter 9, Kingfisher calls Saeris O'Shaleth, or Osha for short. And in Old Fae, O'Shaleth means most sacred. And here's why. It is a type of butterfly, but not any generic butterfly. It is a butterfly that hatches, lives, and dies all within a span of a day. And because they cannot survive the cold atmosphere of the wastelands, which is where they go to hatch. So once every 1,000 years, the wind drops, signaling the soon arrival of the O'Shaleth. Brave warriors would make the trek and risk their lives in order to shield the cocoons with their body heat so they can hatch, taking as long as 12 hours. And once they hatch, they glow blue and pink and silver with an ethereal light. And they have a healing song. And before they die, the O'Shaleth lay eggs with their mates and fill the air with dances. So my first impression of the nickname, I just thought it was Fisher just being an asshole and just being rude. I feel like that was one of the things that made me like him a lot earlier was just how mean he was and how rude he was. I don't know why. I just love a mean man. It's very toxic. But after learning the meaning of it, it just made me fall in love with him so much more because he was trying to make her hate him early on because he wants to deny their mating bond, but he still had a deeper meaning in that nickname. So it's like, like, I'm calling you Osha because they're weak butterflies that die within a day, but also they mean most sacred, and you are my most sacred prize. And it's just
just make a decision, bro. Are you gonna love her or not?
Literally.
For real.
All right, next we're going to talk about the gods and the goddesses that are explained in great detail in the first few chapters of this book. So buckle up because it's a lot of information. So the Fae in this series, they pray to each god and goddess mentioned, and they're referred to as quote-unquote members of the Corcoran in hopes that the gods will return to Evalia. Styx is the god of shadows. Kieran is the god of secrets. Nistane is the goddess of masks. Malus is the god of dawn / new beginnings, and Balmithin, they're the goddesses of the sky, the sun and the moon, basically. And Zareth is the god of chaos and change, and the Fae actually avoid his eye contact to prevent his attention. They also touch his feet to guide his attention elsewhere, and later we learn that he's actually Mal and Mithin's father.
All right, this isn't mythology, but let's talk about rocks, brah. Yeah, I did have a rock collection when I was younger.
I actually collect rocks now for Pickle.
As an adult.
To put in Pickle's.
Oh, yeah. Pickle's a cutie. Pickle's a cactus. Just for our listeners.
Oh, yeah.
Mackenzie's a plant mom. I had a plant and she died. Her name was Poppy. R.I.P. Poppy.
Well, Kano was with me when I bought my very first houseplant.
Yep.
So, and she's still thriving. She's amazing. I love her.
You're a great plant mom.
Thank you. I love my babies.
I need to have fake plants. And yeah. Anyways.
You just need a succulent.
So we get a mention of this rock labradorite in these chapters, and I wanted to include because I just looked it up and then I was like, oh shit, this is actually really cool. And you should look it up too. It's really, really, really pretty. So, quote, the walls were opalescent white marble, faceted with sections of shimmering blues and greens. So this is the labradorite they're referring to. And this rock also exists in real life. It is a calcium-enriched feldspar mineral that has an iridescent sheen and spectrum of colors that is gorgeous. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Look it up. It has been referred to as the stone of magic and the physical form of the Northern Lights. Mackenzie, you want to see the next word?
Aurora.
Anyways, if you listen to Windham and Hatch, Mackenzie has beef with the word Aurora. And I put it in there. I was like, Northern Lights, and I was like, Aurora Borealis?
Aurora.
Aurora. And then also in healing crystal folklore, labradorite also represents the Temple of Stars and assists in traversing the pathways between worlds, which is really cool considering this is portal fantasy and like traveling between different realms. So I feel like she definitely knew what she was doing when she picked that specific mineral to decorate the Winter Palace. Really cool.
Yeah.
You a genius, Callie.
Genius.
All right. Okay, now we're going to get into our world building topic of the day where we break down the geography in the different realms. So we are going to talk about Evalia, Sanisroth, and Zilverin, and we're going to talk a little bit about the other realms that are on the map, but we really don't learn that much about them in book 1, so fingers crossed we will in book 2. So first, let's talk about Evalia. It is ruled by Buttface. No. Belican Debara, and it snows at least once a day here. No thank you. They have one sun and a moon. I thought it was really funny when Saeris, I don't remember which chapter it was, but she was like, I'll have to ask her what a moon is later.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, I saw it. I was like, that's funny. This territory has been at war with Sanisroth for centuries. And without the rings or the relics that only an alchemist can create, the two rival territories are basically locked in a stalemate perpetually. The Fae in this world are bound by rules of war, so they cannot use magic to attack or affect an enemy until they're actually like on their border or they've crossed the border. So that's interesting. And then also Fae magic is very rife in Evelia. There's wards cast over all of it to keep the cold at bay. And the gods worshipped by Evelians were once present in this realm. And then when they left, certain elements of this Fae magic, such as like the god swords or the ability to form mating bonds, died or just slightly reduced over time. And the Quicksilver pool in Evelia is the largest ever documented, wide enough to transport entire armies, and is located deep within the bowels of the Winter Palace. Lycia is another territory on our map. It's only mentioned once, but it is a southern island filled with seafaring folk. The size of their Quicksilver pool has never been confirmed, but it is rumored to be large enough to transport entire armies as well, and it's also located in a deep sea cave. And the Lycians consider it to be their most sacred place of worship. And Lorith gives us a little info drop on their queen. I have no idea how to say this name. Saeris? A beautiful queen that has ruled for over 3,000 years. Ever heard of term limits, Faye? Who is planning on living forever via tonics, elixirs, and vampire blood. Interesting. I feel like we're probably going to meet her possibly next book.
Yeah.
Galaria is another region that's only mentioned once as the Fae living in the mountains to the east. Their Quicksilver pool is located in the hall perched upon the highest peak of their domain. And Carrion also mentions a book he once had in Zilverin with illustrations and descriptions of Fae creatures of the Galarian mountains, which are apparently terrifying. One of the creatures mentioned is a griffin sprite, and he just recalls being like really scared by whatever he was reading in that book. So maybe that's foreshadowing to future books, so they're going to encounter some scary shit in the mountains. All right, let's talk about Saeris. This covers the southwestern portion of the map, and Fae magic actually does not work here. This type of magic needs light and life to survive, and according to Fisher, their territory is made up of death and decay. Santa's Wrath is the warm side of the coin to Evelia's freezing snow, filled mostly with vampires, considering who ruled it prior to the end. Also, the attacks by Santa's Wrathian feeders or slash foot soldiers, and how Fisher describes it as a court of vampires. So I'm pretty sure it's all, if not mostly, vampires that live here, I think.
Yeah.
Their Quicksilver pool is located at the center of their council halls. And then also, I just want to circle all the way to the end. So at the end of book 1, we know that Saeris is going to take the crown and become queen of Saeris Wrath.
Yes.
I cannot wait to see how this plays out. I did not expect that ending, and I'm just like, yes, bitch, you take that crown. I know it's probably going to be a lot more complicated than that, but I'm really excited to see how the war is going to be affected by her taking rule, and now everyone knows what they do of Belican and that he's not what they thought he was. So there's so much stuff that's going to happen in the next book, and I'm just curious to see how it's all going to play out. All right, now we're going to touch on Zilverin really quickly. This is the human realm, and we actually learned that magic once existed here. However, these, quote, heretical powers were stripped away hundreds of years ago, and we don't really get more info as to like how or why that happened, but maybe we'll learn more later. But basically, Zilverin is a hot and windy desert-like environment with sand dunes, 2 suns, keeping it nice and toasty, fucking forever. Like most cities in the human realm, the Silver City is fashioned after a wheel shape. 50 feet high walls act like the spokes of a wheel, designed to keep citizens contained to these different wards and out of the hub where all the rich assholes live. The hub is described as having tree-lined, leafy walkways, and overall is just a nice and clean place with filtered water. Within Zilverin, Madra's palace looms. The palace cells have quite the reputation for being horrible. Saeris once spent the longest 8 minutes of her life there. And while we're talking about Zilverin, I just want to say this place is like so harsh. It sounds freaking terrible. What really made me like stop and think about it, like even when survival is that tight and they're fighting for their lives, still no one dares to deal in something as dangerous as stealing a Guardian's Gauntlet. People are actually afraid to do things because they know exactly how terrible it is there.
Yeah.
And like rightfully so, because like Saeris, all she did was steal a gauntlet, and then Madra was like, all right, 100,000 people are going to die because you offended the crown.
A whole like, ward.
Damn.
Yeah. She's vicious, man.
Yeah.
I do want to piggyback on you mentioning that magic once existed in the human realm. Mm-hmm. We don't really get any description of how it stopped, but we do know that once the portals closed and Madra took over. We know that something happened between Madra and her siblings, which we'll touch on later in the podcast. Damn.
Yeah.
And she somehow ended up in Zilverin, and once the portals closed, she casted out all of the worship of the gods and possibly the magic. So I think it might have something to do with Madra and the portals closing. Not super sure yet, but I feel like that does have a connection.
So hopefully we'll find out.
Yes. All right. Moving on, time for our mini-series Mix and Match, where every week Kana and I will do 2 to 3 mini-series unique to our podcast. They won't be the same every week, so keep tuning in for all the fun.
Yay! All right, our first mini-series is 2 truths and 1 lie. So we're going to make statements about the book, and then we'll try and figure out which one is a lie. I'll go first.
Yes.
All right. So the first statement is a single tooth of Omnam Shakrai, the dragon skeleton, is over a foot long.
Okay.
The second is the full name of the Yvelian king is Belican Dabara.
Okay.
The third, when Saeris was 10 years old, it rained in the Silver City. Which one's the lie?
When Saeris was 10 years old, it rained in the Silver City.
Damn. Yeah.
Of course I remember
when it happened.
Of course I remember when you said the dragon one, I was like, I know this one. I remember the description of this dragon.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. My turn. Okay. So the first one is Madra's army has 3,000 soldiers. Fisher's eyes are described to be jade with the hint of quicksilver. And Fisher and his mother moved to the Winter Palace when he was 11.
She has 2,000 soldiers, not 3.
Nice.
Damn. I'm impressed with myself. Wow, we both killed that.
We did. Okay. Would you rather travel in the Quicksilver pool without a relic to any other realm and be stuck there? Okay. Or would you rather be stuck in the ward that Saeris grew up in?
I don't think I could live there. I think I'd kill myself. That sounds like the worst possible place ever. I think I would risk it for the biscuit and go for the Quicksilver. And
what if you end up in Sansaroth, or have you say it?
Then I'll just jump off a bridge there. Sounds hot. The water's disgusting. They've filtered out the solids. Like, ooh. And it just sounds terrible. That's not a life. I feel like I would rather just risk it.
Okay, what if you don't survive the Quicksilver pool because you don't have a relic? So, like, what happens if you come out looking like Heron?
And
you end up
jump off a bridge. I'm like, if I don't like the outcome in any of these situations, I'm jumping off a bridge. And that's it. That's how I solve my problems.
I am not traveling in that Quicksilver pool. I'm just going to stay in the ward at this point. I'm going to die regardless.
Okay, now that I think about it, maybe I could just make Carrion love me, and then I could be his sugar baby.
Yeah.
But still, I'm like, there's a 0.0001% chance I'll end up with a hot Fae warrior if I enter the Quicksilver, so I might take it.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna risk it for the biscuit.
Oh my gosh. Who was that?
It was me.
Oh, I thought it was the cat.
All right. Would you rather live in Zilverin for a year in the same ward where she's from, so not the hub, or would you rather spend 1 week in the palace cell?
Where do I go after the week is over?
I don't know, bro. You're asking too many questions.
It's just like,
I guess you would go back.
I'm still in Zilverin.
I guess you would go back to real life. You would either have to deal with living in Zilverin or be in the dungeon for a week.
I would just stay in Zilverin then, because I would just have to go back to Zilverin after the
No,
week.
you would come back to being Mackenzie Johnson.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, so I would just take the week in the dungeon then.
You sure?
I still spend a whole year there.
You sure?
They didn't do anything to her in the dungeon. They didn't do anything to her until after they took her out, right?
Well, yeah, but she said, like, not that time in the dungeon, but she once before that time, she spent 8 minutes there, and it was like the worst 8 minutes of her life, she said. It's like there's shit, and it's hot, and there's blood, and there's dying people.
Okay, well then I'll just spend a year in Zilverin. I could just have a little fun in Zilverin. You know, go to Kala and get drunk and sleep with some random man.
Yeah, a year is so long though. But I think I would do the same thing. I don't think I could last more than 30 seconds in that dungeon without... Well, you know what my solution would be.
Yeah. Jumping off a bridge.
Sorry. All right. For our last mini-series today, we are going to be sharing on our social media, specifically our Instagram, some text exchanges between us as we were both reading Quicksilver. So be on the lookout for those today. They're pretty funny. But go check out our Instagram at Shadow and Starlight Pod for that mini-series.
Yeah.
All right. Before we close out our episode for today, time for Trial by Trivia. So each week, Mackenzie and I will give each other and our listeners 2 trivia questions. At the end of our Quicksilver coverage, we will tally who has the most points between hosts, and loser will have to do something embarrassing or funny that the winner or you guys as fans come up with. So for our When the Moon Hatched, I won by half a point, and then Mackenzie had to get slapped with whipped cream. So it was pretty iconic. Okay, who was Saeris supposed to meet in Elroy's workshop while she was busy stealing the gauntlet?
She was supposed to meet some guy about a deal. I didn't have to give his name.
Yeah, bruh.
I don't know his name, but I know she was trying to meet somebody. They had a deal or exchange planned or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll give you half a point. His name was Jairus Wade. I'll be nice. Okay. Yeah, 0.5.
Thanks, bro.
Right. Hit me.
All right. What is the name of the King's Royal Archivist?
Is that the one that worked in the forge or no?
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Okay. The Clementine. Clemmy.
Yeah, it's Clements. Shit.
Bam. Okay. All right. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
What is the name of the Oracle?
Oh, Maui. Or Maui.
Yeah.
Mayway, something like that.
Maui.
I knew you were gonna ask that question. I just had a feeling. I was like, when I was like rereading, I was like, she's gonna ask me this question. I just have a feeling this is gonna pop up.
I didn't
in the
even
trivia.
want to give you that question. I had a better one. Whatever.
Oh.
I'll save it for next week.
Yeah, what have you say her name? Okay. I feel like this is an easy one. How did the Fae end up with their canines?
Because the blood curse.
Yeah. I was like, this is kind of easy.
Low key.
Okay, not bad.
All right. So I have 2 points. Mackenzie has 1.5. So it's going to be a tight race. I can feel it.
I'm ready.
That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our first episode of Quicksilver and appreciate your support.
Join us next Thursday for our Quicksilver coverage, where we will be covering chapters 10 through 18, pages 133 through 272 for your reread or to refresh your memory.
Yeah. As always, we appreciate any and all feedback from you guys, our wonderful listeners. So please reach out to us on our socials. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't, or just reach out to us if you want to talk about Quicksilver or When the Moon Hatched or just books in general. This is a new podcast, so please take the time to leave us a review. It really does mean the world, and we would like to see this business grow with your help. Follow us on social media and all major podcast platforms and on YouTube for a freshly baked episode to be delivered to you directly next week.
Bye, friends. See you next week.
Bye, friends.